and welcome to the October regular meeting of the Calgary Police Commission. I call this meeting to order and ask that everyone ensure that your microphones are muted until you need to speak. My name is Sean Cornett, and I'm the chair of the commission. I'm joined today by Commissioners Amtul Siddiqui, Marilyn North-Pagan, Susan Mallon, Kim Lynch-Proctor, Heather Campbell, Teresa Rossell, TJ Tsong, Jeff French, Cherie Nyson-Jordan, Kelly Ogle, Rob Tangay, Ayo Adirdran, and Councillors Jennifer Wyness and Raj Dhaliwal. Today's Calgary Police Service representatives are led by Chief Constable Mark Neufeld. Chief Neufeld, could you please introduce those you expect to speak today during today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. I will take that, but that's okay. So good afternoon, Chair, Councillors, Commissioners. Thank you for having us this afternoon. My name is Superintendent Claire Smart, and I'm Chief Neufeld's Executive Officer. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to our executive leadership team, and I'm going to start with the table to my right here and go down and work down the table. So we have Superintendent Joe Brar of Operational Support Division, Director Mike Nunn of Strategic Communications Section, Executive Director Tricia Spademan of the Finance Division, Executive Director Catherine Murphy of the Legal and Regulatory Services Division, Deputy Chief Raj Gill, Bureau of Community Policing, Deputy Chief Chad Toffick, Bureau of Corporate Performance, Chief Constable Mark Neufeld, Acting Deputy Chief Corey Daly of Bureau of Investigative Services, Acting Deputy Melanie Onsescu, Bureau of Services and Community Support, and Chief People Officer Kim Armstrong. I'd also like to introduce our presenters today for the Canine and Mounted Patrol Unit presentations. So behind me, we have Inspector Shannon Scott of our support section, Sergeant Ian Vernon of our Canine Unit, and Mounted Unit Supervisor Robin Kolteski. So great, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. For those not familiar with our role, our commission is a body of 13 community members and 2 city councillors appointed by City Council and the Government of Alberta. We provide independent citizen governance and oversight of the Calgary Police Service on behalf of all Calgarians. To protect the political neutrality of the police, Alberta's Police Act requires that the police chief report directly to us instead of elected officials. We provide direction to the police through the chief, police policies, monitoring the police complaint process, and approval of how the police budget is spent. Today is one of 8 regular meetings we have each year to openly discuss police governance and oversight matters with the service's leadership and to hear from the public. We also have several private monthly committee meetings where commissioners work more directly with the service on various matters that cannot be discussed publicly. Our commission is meeting today on the ancestral and traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, made up of the Siksika, Piikani, Ombi, Biskibagani, and Kainai First Nations. It is also home to the Iathka, Nakota, Wiskatabai First Nations, comprised of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations, as well as Tsuut'ina First Nation. These are the people who made a treaty with the Crown, forming Treaty 7 territory. Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Métis Nation of Alberta. Our commission is committed to doing our part to address the inequity and intergenerational trauma caused by past and current wrongs, to support reconciliation with all Indigenous people who share this land with us. Our commission also condemns racism and prejudice in all forms and is committed to being anti-racist. We stand in solidarity with all Calgarians who are Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. For those joining us for the first time, allow me to provide a brief overview of the format for our meeting today. The public session of this meeting is being live streamed, and a recording will be posted online so that we can make it available to those unable to attend. There will be several presentations from the Calgary Police Service, commission members, and commission staff. Commissioners will have the chance to ask questions or make comments after each one. Once we've completed the presentations, we'll move on to the public participation portion of the meeting. Those who are registered to speak will then be called on by name and will have a chance to either ask a question or make a presentation for our consideration. Following the public participation, we will close the public portion of the meeting with the Chief and I taking questions from the media. Everyone is welcome to observe the media availability, but only media can participate. To start our agenda items, I will now call for declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest from the commissioners. Are there any such? No? Hearing no declarations, I will now ask for approval of the agenda. Does any member of the commission wish to request an amendment to the agenda? Nope. No, seeing and hearing none, I will now ask for approval of the consent agenda. For those viewing today's meeting, the consent agenda is a list of routine items and reports that all commissioners agree can be accepted without more discussion or a separate vote. Does any member of the commission wish to request an item on the consent agenda be brought forward for discussion? Seeing and hearing no requests, I declare both the agenda and the consent agenda approved as presented. I have a few things to highlight as part of my chair's report this month. The most significant event was Council passing amendments to the Calgary Police Commission bylaw. The bylaw was first written in 1997 and has only minor amendments since then. The updates Council passed mainly brought the bylaw into line with provincial legislation, but they also formalized the expectation that our commissioners should be reflective of Calgary and simplify the legislative framework under which we operate. We are grateful to Council and the City of Calgary for their support to update and modernize the bylaw. Commissioners also had the privilege this month of attending 2 events honoring the Calgary Police Service members. 5 of us were able to help welcome the new officers of Class 250 by participating in their graduation. 2 other commissioners were then able to help celebrate members at the other end of their career by attending the long service reception for retired and long-serving members. Once again, congratulations, and thank you to both groups of members for serving our community in this way. The last thing I want to highlight from our commission is that we launched 2 new Lifetime Achievement Awards, and nominations are open until next week. The Lifetime of Distinguished Service Award will recognize 1 Calgary Police Service sworn or civilian employee annually that has exceptionally contributed to positive change in policing over a 20-year career. The Lifetime Achievement in Community Policing Award will recognize 1 community member annually that has exceptionally contributed to positive changes in policing as a volunteer or in a professional capacity. We know there are many employees and community members that have made outstanding contributions to policing in our city, and we hope these awards will be one small way we can recognize them. Nominations are open until October 31st, and more information can be found on our Commission's website. I would now like to recognize some of the work the service has done this month to deliver on the policing priorities of Calgarians. The most significant event we saw this month was when 2 armed suspects opened fire on officers in a busy shopping center parking lot. While many of the details of this incident are still being investigated by the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, I want to thank the officers involved for their courage and actions to protect the public safety on that day. Our Commission's thoughts are with the officer that was injured and the officers who were involved and the family of the deceased suspect. I also want to recognize the substantial work done by the traffic section this month, as there were several serious collisions that they are now investigating. Investigators from that area also laid charges in a hit and run from August, showing that fleeing a scene is not a way to avoid accountability. Members of the service have also been kept busy keeping the peace as tensions continue to run high over the conflict between Israel and Hamas. I want to commend the service for proactively moving to protect faith communities at the start of the conflict in order to prevent any violence from spilling over here. And I want to thank the members that have been policing these tense protests, as this issue is deeply personal and emotionally charged for so many. You've done well in a very difficult environment. Thank you. The service also launched a new campaign against hate this month in partnership with the Calgary FC soccer team. The campaign is an excellent example of working with the community to prevent and address crime. And finally, the service was recognized both nationally and internationally this month. Constable Abdi Hassan was the recipient of the Association of Black Law Enforcers Community Leadership Award for his exceptional contributions and relationships with the East African and youth communities. And then the service was selected to be featured at the International Association of Chiefs of Police conference for its work around reconciliation, alternative call response, community engagement, crime prevention, and youth intervention. On behalf of our commission, thank you to all the officers involved in these highlights and for all the others who have worked tirelessly this month to keep Calgarians safe. In closing, I want to publicly thank 3 members of our commission who are joining us for the last time this afternoon. Council held their annual organizational meeting today. While we won't know what decisions they made around appointments and reappointments until next month, we do know 3 members of our commission have chosen to step down this year. Commissioners Teresa Rosell and Kim Lynch Proctor both joined our commission in 2020 and have decided not to stand for reappointment after serving 2 terms. We have benefited greatly from Commissioner Rosell's financial expertise and Commissioner Lynch Proctor's governance experience. Both of you were heavy hitters on our board, and you will be missed. Thank you for the time and energy you have given us. Thank you so much. We also learned yesterday that Councillor Raj Dhaliwal will not be returning as one of Council's representatives. While you're only with us for a year, we always appreciated your gentle insights and perspectives. Thank you for your contributions as well. With that, I will conclude my chair's report, and we will now move on to our presentations from the Calgary Police Service. We'll be hearing today from the main units, where service animals are used to support the work of officers. Both the service's Canine Unit and Mounted Unit are here and will be presenting one after the other, followed by questions. I also want to note that to give more time for these and the employee presentation, the monthly crime trend and anti-racism work updates that we typically hear were on the consent agenda. They will not be presented verbally this month, but are available in the meeting documents on our website. So Chief Neufeld, could you please go ahead with the presentations?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. Before I do that, I just want to say thanks for the acknowledgement of the good work by our officers and in the examples that you've used there. On behalf of the service, I too want to say thank you to our outgoing commissioners, Commissioner Rosell and Commissioner Lynch Proctor. First, certainly 2 terms. Super insightful, a lot of value add in the areas there, including the 2 terms actually included COVID. So I feel like you get long service for that. And as I think back to your first meeting you, which was way after, you first came to the commission and how long we met online and that type of thing. I just think of all the things and issues that we've been through. And I just want to say thank you for the amazing contributions on behalf of both of you. You did a lot of good service for the Calgary Police Service, for the Commission and the citizens of Calgary. And we want to say thank you on behalf of all of us sincerely for that. So we are going to miss you. And moving to Councillor Dhaliwal, certainly, I think you mentioned that the councillor has been on for 1 year, but certainly 1 year added a lot in 1 year. And I know Councillor Dhaliwal will continue to work very closely, obviously, with your active participation in the community and all that you're able to convey to us that way. So just want to say thank you and wish you well as you move on. A couple of really quick things as well that just happened in the last couple of days I wanted to highlight. Our recruiting unit actually held or hosted the Blue Line Expo. And so we all know the challenges that law enforcement and security and first responders generally are facing around recruiting. And so we've got the Blue Line Expo, which was a large recruiting fair that was hosted here in Calgary for the first time. It's always been hosted in Ontario for the first time yesterday, and notwithstanding the bad weather, the turnout was actually better in numbers than it usually is in Ontario, notwithstanding the bigger population there. So kudos to the recruiting unit for the work they did to bring that here. And I understand there's a commitment actually for it to come back to Western Canada for the next 3 years as a result of the success from this time. And this morning, we opened up a youth cyber summit at the YouthLink Interpretive Center. So we had 80 kids, grade 9 kids in there today looking at cyber hygiene, cyber safety, and a presentation this afternoon on various types of online risk. So it's been well covered and that sort of thing. I think it's a fantastic initiative. We all know the challenges kids face in the online environment. And so I think this is a great move from a prevention standpoint. So just wanted to highlight those couple of things. Moving to 5.1, the canine and mounted patrol reports. I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Gill for a quick introduction.
There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Chief. Without further ado, just given the time limits that we have, I'm going to flip it over to Superintendent Joe Brar, the Superintendent in charge of operation or real-time operational division. And Superintendent Brar has several guests with him that he's going to introduce for the presentation. Joe.
Thanks, Deputy. Thanks, Commission and Commission Chair and Commission members for having us here and allowing us the opportunity to present on two very valuable units in the Calgary Police Service, all falling under the support section, which is led by Inspector Shannon Scott. And then we have with us Sergeant Ian Vernon from the Canine Unit and Civilian Supervisor Robin Klatusky from the Mounted Unit as well. So while they're preparing their presentation, I'll just introduce what you can expect to hear today. So you'll hear from both our Canine Unit and our Mounted Unit. You'll hear about the Canine Unit and all the different functions they have within the Calgary Police Service, beyond what you might think of a typical a dog unit would have. They do everything from evidence collection to the usual suspect apprehension to community events and lots in between that as well. Similarly, you hear about the Mounted Unit from their patrol work to community engagement work. A lot of you may have seen more and more presence over the years of the Mounted Unit downtown. The team will speak to how that came to be and just the evolution of the Mounted Unit. And at the same time, you'll hear about the length that the Calgary Police Service has had a Canine Unit and the evolution of that Canine Unit to stay modern and up with modern times. With that being said, I'll hand it over to the team.
Afternoon, Chair, Chief, members of the Commission. And I'd introduce our team. We've got Sergeant Ian Vernon from the Canine Unit, and Robin will follow as the Supervisor for the Mounted Unit. We do have a PowerPoint we'd like to touch on in relation to the Canine Unit. Superintendent Brar has touched on the deployment model. We'll have some questions available at the end. We do have a video that's a part of the presentation itself. We've got 60 years of tradition with the Canine Unit. We're very proud to present to the group today, and I'll invite Sergeant Ian Vernon up to speak.
Perfect, thank you. If we could load up that PowerPoint now, please. Perfect. So our Canine Unit was formed. Oh, sorry, just jumped on my screen here. Back in 1960, that was 1 year after the Vancouver Police and 2 years after the RCMP. So we're the second oldest municipal police agency with a Canine Unit in Canada. The effectiveness Perfect. Nice. So the effectiveness was quickly recognized at how valuable the police service dogs were to the organization, and those 2 members were quickly supplemented to 8 and a full-time sergeant by 1966. Today, the Canine Unit consists of 17 handlers, which also includes 22 dogs, so primarily German Shepherds, Dutch Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and some Labrador Retrievers. All those breeds are traditionally used in police work and known to have outstanding abilities to really carry out the job. Canine Unit plays an integral role in keeping and helping Calgary safe by locating offenders for serious offenses, recovering evidence, locating missing persons, and with our 3 detection profiles, including drugs, explosives, and human remains. On average, each handler is called to approximately 4 calls per shift, with the average call taking probably 1.5 hours to 2 hours, depending on our deployment. Sorry. Our team is comprised of 15 patrol dogs. Those are responsible for the base of what we think of as far as police service work, locating and arresting suspects. We have 3 explosive detection dogs, obviously there to look for explosives, primarily sanitizing before major events like the Stampede Parade, and also serving the Calgary International Airport. 2 human remains detection dogs, who primarily support our missing persons and homicide units with their investigations, and then 2 drug detection dogs, which support multiple areas of the service, primarily assisting with controlled drugs and substance warrants. So canine calls for service are dynamic and they're challenging. They often involve firearms, stolen vehicles, and people heavily under the influence of illegal narcotics. Police service dogs are a non-lethal use of force option that provides separation between officers and offenders. That separation affords us time and opportunity to use additional tactics and really helps de-escalate many calls and reduces the needs of higher levels of force. In the last 3.5 years, our Canine Unit has attended almost 14,000 calls for service. And as that kind of gets boiled down to, only 1.46% of those calls actually resulted in a PSD contact. This year, looking at our arrests from January to July, there was 164 arrests directly related to our Canine Unit. 22 offenders were actually contacted or bitten by the police service dogs. Of those 22 offenders, to give you an idea of the nature of their offenses, it's 144 criminal code charges out of just those 22 offenders. It's a bit of a stat and a table here. I won't break down too much here on our canine deployments, arrests, and contacts. We'll see, though, we had been stable around kind of 60 contacts for the last 3 years and trending down a little bit this year. So relatively small numbers to really try to delve too much into increases and decreasing, but we're certainly maintaining stable and maybe decreasing a little bit. We have a video here, which will get you to queue up. This, as a concept, this video was about actually a 40-minute helicopter follow. Obviously, we've shortened that down and eliminated down to just about 4.5 minutes, and really shows the typical operation for our canine units and how that evolves. So a patrol unit locating a suspicious vehicle, how that vehicle starts to evade arrest, and then how that ultimately concludes. So just get play the video now. Do I have to?
$1448 of the 96 vehicle, just northbound 360 up to Radcliffe Drive. 48 sounding good. What are the speed like for the 86 and any driving infraction? I picked up his speeds a little bit through the here. He's probably going 50 in the school zone, so just picking it up a bit. 1448 is going to be occupied ×2, one male driver, one female passenger. Driver is going to be wearing a black and white hoodie with a hood up and a black hat.
Hawk 1 north through Memorial, almost rear-ended a black pickup truck continuing northbound. Hawk 1 through Center Ave, continuing northbound. Speeds right now are 110 to 120. To the west end around northbound at the Subaru dealership. Actually going to be off-roading out to Barlow Trail. Be through the ditch at the Subaru dealership and northbound Barlow.
992 patrol units with that type of driving. We'll just leave Hawk to call it and just follow well behind in support. Unfortunately, plan for this 86, we'd have Hawk continue calling while patrol and Canine follow in support. And once vehicles stop in occupants or a safe distance away, we'll have units move in to arrest and secure that vehicle. C Command 1 is ready, so we will move over to that channel on Hawk's call.
Hawk 1, we got that. The 86 northbound 36th Street, just past the Whitehorn LRT. And we'll be over to, actually 1 sec, up to 39 Ave, through 39 Ave, we'll be over to Command 1.
Never.
Yep, we'll follow this vehicle till the driver goes to ground. Free.
Southbound Castle Ridge Boulevard, back to you.
Once the driver's away from the vehicle, K9 with patrol assistance will move into the arrest, and the secondary unit will secure the vehicle.
Hawk 1 southbound Edmonton Trail, westbound in the alley, just north of the Esso on 16th Avenue, westbound in the alley. Okay, coming to a stop, 238 16th Avenue, northeast, bodies out, female, black backpack dressed in all dark clothing, away southbound. Driver still at the driver's side door. Okay, driver's away under a tree, southbound.
Hawk, are they far enough away even if units move in? I'd say yes.
Yeah, that female's away. The driver's in the trees somewhere. I'd say units are good to move in. They're right by some garbage bins facing south.
Yep, let's focus on the driver, and Hawk, if you can keep your eyes on the trees there.
Driver's running back to the V. No, driver's out to 16 Ave. K9, you'll have him right there. K9 contact on 16 Avenue. That female passenger's on the south side of 16 by 2 Street. Peters Drive-In. Yeah, marked unit out with her now.
317 will be out to K9.
Hawk 1, K9 and another, yeah, there's lots of units out now on 16 trying to take the driver into custody.
14 passenger in custody. K938, code 2, you might want to get, as soon as you got the firearm right in front of me. Code 2 to the Avery, did you say you dropped the firearm? Yeah, rifle, at the front of me.
Perfect, thanks. I hope that helped put in perspective a little bit. We attend almost that exact type of call, probably 5 to 8 times a week. So it's a pretty standard operation for our Canine Unit. Can you just switch back to the PowerPoint for me, please? And sorry, just a kind of quick reminder, it was brought up to there, that initial call, that actual video was 40 minutes long. Obviously, we compressed it down to just over 4 minutes. So help us explain some of the breaks in time and the action there. So for our past 60 years, our canine training program has really been one of the most highly regarded in Canada. We're a founding member of the Canadian Police Canine Association. We host an annual high-risk deployment course, which has a multi-year waiting list for agencies right across the country. And we regularly evaluate other departments' contacts and offer our expertise there. All our handlers must be first-class constables in order to apply for a unit. They receive all the standard in-service training for use of force, investigative and diversity training before they even start within our unit. Handlers and PSDs are then certified upon training completion, which is roughly 6 months for an initial training period. And again, after an additional 6-month training period of being operationally deployed, and then both the handler and the dog are recertified annually throughout the PSD's career. Kind of getting into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of our program. One of the things that we're really quite well known for across country is our grip training. So when we're referring to grip, we're talking about how the dog bites, and that's super important when we're training our police dogs to truly minimize injury to offenders. And we accomplish this really by two ways. The first and foremost is just by eliminating dogs from selection when we're actually looking for them, that we only purchase dogs that have and hold a natural full mouth bite. There certainly is some research there that shows this is heavily genetic based. So if they won't have any of that at the initial stages, it's not likely developed. And then finally, we do a lot of work in reinforcing the dogs to push rather than pull. And it sounds a little bit complicated, but truly we just imagine an immovable object, and if you can never pull it, but it's easy to push, the dogs learn very quickly that they can push instead of pull. As a result, we typically see way less than kind of 2 to 3% of our canine contacts resulting in a 46-1 notification. And just our review process when we actually do have our PSD contacts. So when the handlers have a PSD contact on the street there, they notify one of the 2 Canine Unit sergeants and the applicable district sergeant where that occurred. That in turn works up the chain to the duty staff sergeant. And that primary role there is to determine if a 46-1 notification is going to be required. After all those notifications are made, the handlers complete all their required paperwork. It's a separate SPORs, their notes, and update the reports. Contact report is done, and then Hawk's video, body-worn camera video, and so is forwarded on to the sergeants there. Then both unit sergeants review that contact, make any recommendations or any observations, and that's forwarded off to the support section staff sergeant, who again reviews that footage and all those comments, and goes from there. The contacts then are debriefed at our unit annual meetings, monthly meetings, just to make sure that all feedback and any lessons learned are transferred from each handler or from one specific handler to the entire unit. It's also kind of good to know too that our handlers are wearing body-worn cameras now. So between the handlers' body-worn cameras, the other patrol officers' body-worn cameras, the footage from the helicopter, we seldom have any canine contacts that aren't reviewable by video. And finally, we'd certainly be remiss to not talk about the community engagement that our unit does as well. Dogs are great they break down barriers and get people talking. We're far more approachable when we have a dog beside us. So it does break down a ton of barriers. We're very active in the Calgary Police Youth Foundation. Our calendar that we produce every year, we do roughly 10,000 copies, which raises a little over $80,000 a year. Been doing that for over 10 years now. So we're getting close to $1 million raised for the Calgary Police Youth Foundation. We attend YouthLink weekly throughout the school year for the police school once a week. Knew that. We partner now with the CPS Cadet Corps for an annual training and mentorship program, and we participate in roughly 100 other events, both internally and externally, just in the community. And that's what we have for the program. Transition to questions or onto the Robin. Okay, perfect. We'll pass you over to Robin Kotelski, who will talk about our mounted unit.
Hello, and thank you for having me today to talk about my favorite subject, the mounted unit. If we could play the video, please.
My favourite part about working in this unit is I love being a police officer, and then to do it on horseback is just like a dream come true. So we do patrol. We patrol downtown in Stephen Avenue or the LRT or down by the river, and we take calls for service. Some people go out in their vehicles, some people go out on the mountain bikes, and we go out on horses, but we just do the same job.
We are a positive policing tool. I can't even explain another unit that probably brings the level of positive policing that we do, as well as the de-escalation that we do. We get subjects to comply instantly just from the presence of our horses. We don't have to do PR events specifically for PR. We get PR by being on patrol and by being around the C-train platforms and being downtown and being active in the city supporting the front line.
All day long we get asked if people can come up to the horses and if they can pet them and if they can touch them, and it truly depends on the circumstances of what we're doing. If we're dealing with a call and it's not appropriate, then we ask them just to stand back and that we are busy and we're operational. If it is appropriate, yes, they can come up, they can take pictures, and they can pet the horses if it's, like I say, if it's appropriate. But the first of all is we're operational, and if we're doing a job, then that's what we're doing.
So the mounted unit also provides a valuable heritage piece for Calgarians, because the people love to see horses, they expect to see horses. People traveling to Calgary love to see us. So we really touch the community that way as well.
The best thing is the positive attitude of people that come towards you. because like policing over the last few years has had a really negative image, but when you have the horses, it's generally really, really positive, and people are just amazed to see you.
Okay, well, that was just a brief visual that I can provide to you today on what we do. So I'll just give you a little brief history of our unit. So in 2015, the mounted unit was reformed basically in our mandate to require us to be more as an operational presence and value to the service. So with that, Calgary Police Service facilities built stables for the horses to house at the North Service Center near Canine and Tactical Unit. We are considered a support unit for the Calgary Police Service. And along with building the stables, they recognized that there was a need to bring in an equestrian subject matter expert to assist with training the members as well as the horses. So that's when I was hired in 2016 to start reforming the unit to be in an operational capacity. Since then, that was 8 years ago. So the mounted unit has been building from its ground up, basically. We had to wash the horses that were in the service at that time. They weren't operationally capable. They're much more of a ceremonial presence, which is important too. But as far as taking calls for service downtown Calgary, we needed a specific type of horse to be able to do that job. So the past 8 years, we've been replenishing our herd, and we currently now have 5 certified police service horses, and 2 are retired this year. So that would have made 7, but we're down to 5 now. Ideally, it would be our most beneficial to have 6 to 8 certified horses to meet our crowd management requirements. The theory is that the more herd, the more horse presence, the more you can get things done as a troop. So currently our unit is also comprised of 4 authorized full-time constables. And in 2021, we established a part-time program because if one constable goes out on annual leave, we need to fill that void, or a member sick or what have you. We just, and so we use a reserve program now to fill any gaps. Our patrols are off in pairs. There's actually 2 downtown today currently. I don't know, I haven't seen them walk by the window yet, but so that part-time program has been really beneficial to our service because it's graded our numbers, and that way we're able to do more operations and touch the community more consistently on a daily basis. Even just this year alone, over 100 shifts have been covered by our part-time program. We do have operational portfolios within our unit. We're a very multifaceted support tool for the organization. 65% of what we do currently is operational patrol. So we are basically frontline support. We are, like I said in the video, we're being on horseback. It is a community relations piece that I can't even compare it to any other unit other than Canine because they have dogs. But the public love it, and we bring joy to everyone that we meet, even vulnerable people that might have had a poor experience with police in the past. That horse really does bring that back to the community to bridge that gap so we can have more de-escalation and positive contacts. We have been focusing mostly on the LRT line and just the encampment issues that we were facing, mostly in District 1, 3, and 6 this year. We also have a portfolio for search. We have a very high vantage point, so we're about 12 feet off the ground. So with that, we're able to see really further in distances. So the most recent missing persons, we were able to cover ground quite effectively and narrow down their search areas quite quickly. we can cover about 75 kilometers in about 2 days with just 4 horses on searches. So we're a really high asset there for our organization for that. And most recently, we've been building our portfolio within the public safety unit for the crowd management piece. The past few years since the COVID outbreak, we've been really noticing a lot more gatherings for protests and public disorder, and we've been able to accommodate the needs to help minimize those conflicted groups by deploying our 6 horses. Most recently, we've seen the Eritrean protest in Falcon Ridge. Our horses were present there and was actually able to help de-escalate the situation quite effectively. And now with the Israeli and pro-Palestinian protests, we're getting called out for those more often as well. So again, our horses are just becoming a lot more used in the service as an operational tool. We do have a ceremonial piece as well. It's not very large. It's about only 5 to 10% of what we do, but it's a significant piece within our service. So we will also attend, Remembrance Day events and service member funerals if they arise. We joined Edmonton when one of their members was fallen during the line of duty. So those events are really, really important, and we also impact the community that way as well as our service members. I guess the last note is we just appreciate the support that our organization is providing us to provide the community another positive policing tools, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for both of those presentations. Is there anything else that you had to present today?
No, Chair. No,
Okay,
nothing
great.
further.
So questions. All right, perfect. Great. So I will open it up to commission members for questions. I have Commissioner Siddiqui to start.
Thank you for those presentations. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the length of the training that you go through. So the dog handlers with the dogs, the mounted police unit, the training there, and then do you have to go back and retrain at any time?
Yeah, for sure. On the dog side, so initial patrol training is roughly 6 months for the patrol dogs to get up and trained. And then each additional profile, so explosive dogs, drug detection dogs, human remains dogs, those are generally kind of 3 to 4 months. Depends a little bit on the dogs, a little bit on the weather, and a little bit on the handler's experience. The more experienced a handler is, obviously, the faster they can progress through training. So that's that initial period. And then as far as ongoing training, each handler is required to do at least 4 hours of training per profile per week. So you can add that up. So an additional roughly 200 hours of training a year for each handler. And then, as I said there, each year they do go through a certification on all the profiles for each dog. So patrol dogs recertify, our explosive, our drugs, and our human remains detection dogs all recertify annually with their handlers. Does that answer your question? And I'll just turn it over to Robin for talking about the mounted unit.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do cover quite a bit of training. So it all begins with interested members. Along with Canine, our members have to be a 5-year member constable within the service first, as we're a specialty unit. From when they gain their interest, they usually, we call them quarries, they volunteer with our unit for probably about 2 years, which gives them a lot of basic, horse handling and just understanding of what our mandate is about. Then they can complete a 6-week basic training standard for operational patrol. And then that would certify that member to be operational on a horse. They already know how to do patrol, right, as a member of the police service. So our 6-week program is mostly about how to do it on horseback and search and things like just a little bit more of our specialties in the crowd management piece. We have ongoing training throughout the year. We do team training almost weekly just to keep honing in on those skills. It's a perishable skill, so you want to just keep practicing and developing, and a certification process every year to recertify that member on a horse.
Thanks for that. Just one additional question about the mounted unit. How many, I guess, serious calls do you respond to, or criminal acts are you responding to, not daily, monthly, annually?
Sure. We are mostly self-generated for calls. We don't have a CAD at all. So we listen a lot to the radio, and we do a lot of our own like investigative type deployment. So we look for required issues that we need to face. Most of our calls on our regular patrol would be like vulnerable persons. We bring a lot of Narcan with us because we're outside and we're along the riverbanks and stuff like that. So we really can find a lot of people that are in, you know, life-threatening conditions at times. The most serious calls we do have is usually a disruptive fight or whatever in the moment, and we can kind of stop that from happening as well. I think our searches can speak from themselves, whether that's within a homicide investigation or just even a missing persons, right? As well, we also have done a little bit of, you know, rescue off the river. There's a lot of people that when they're down the river and they're on those rafts and things like that, like when we're there, we've actually brought people in with our horses from the river. So it's very dynamic, the types of calls we go to, but we're basically like the beat team, or the bike team is the best thing I could compare us to.
That's awesome. Thank you both.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell, please go ahead. Commissioner's virtual today.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's rare that I'm virtual, but here in Ottawa, because I had a meeting with the National Research Council this morning. Thanks very much for both presentations on both the Canine Unit and the Mounted Unit. I appreciate the increasing need for crowd control and the public safety aspect of the Mounted Unit and the 12-foot vantage point that it does give you. I'm quite tall, for those of you that have actually met me in person, and I've stood beside some of Calgary Police Services mounted horses, and I think the belly of one of the horses was actually taller than me when I was at the dry cleaner on 17th Avenue. So and I heard you about requiring somewhere between 6 to 8 horses. So wanting to increase the corral by 2 and to really deliver some of the operational needs that you had. I did want to focus the majority of my questions on the Canine Unit. This is a presentation I've waited quite almost 2 years for, so I'm quite interested. I just wanted to get a sense of the data that's on page 5 of your presentation. There are only 22 contacts in 6 months, and I understand that a contact means a dog bite. Are those, and that's about 13% of the arrests that the dogs participate in, are those exclusively from the 15 patrol dogs, or the full 22 that are involved with explosives, human remains, and drugs?
Those would just be the 15 patrol dogs. Yeah.
Okay. So I think you'd said that there was about 2 of those types of takedowns that we saw in the video, and that video was quite effective. Thank you. Per week. And would those typically result in a bite?
No, our total arrest is roughly 8 or 9 arrests to every canine contact, and we see those similar helicopter videos or similar follows, like 86 follows like that, probably 5 to 8 times a week. So, roughly break it down that way. We
Okay,
see
so
roughly
8 8 to 9 arrests per bite. Okay, so I think there's an opportunity in terms, and this is probably a follow-up for Superintendent Brar to consider in his area, that the data the commission receives on police dogs is infrequent and sparse in my experience. Canines are considered a use of force tool, and we tend to just report on them annually with all the other use of force tools, CEWs, handgun, shotgun, automatic rifle, ARWIN, etc. And police dogs are considered less than lethal use of force tools, not non-lethal, just from my perspective to correct that language. Although Calgary's Canine Unit was formed in 1960, Canada's historic use of police dogs on Black people dates from slave catchers to current day. Current data for Toronto Police Service on use of force has that in 2020, it was reported that Black people were grossly overrepresented in most use of force categories. So where Black people only represented 8.8% of Toronto's population, they represented 57.1% of cases involving a police dog. So for Calgary, Black people represent about 4% of Calgary's population. What percentage of cases involving a police dog involve Black people in Calgary, please?
So for those 22 contacts, 2 of those people were identified as Black.
Thank you. So how frequently are racialized members of the population engaged with police dogs? Is there a proportionality issue or an overrepresentation compared to the population?
I wouldn't give you the exact population stats, but I can say for the canine contacts for the 22 that we were looking at for this calendar year, 18 were identified as Caucasian. So the remaining 4 were non.
Thank you. And, I'm thinking of the types of dogs. And would you agree that, for the Belgian Manilos, Manilois, I'm sorry, I should say that better, it's French, and the German Shepherds, CPS still orders and breeds these particular dogs, one for their hunting capabilities, but also for the weaponized effect they have on people.
Sorry, I'm not quite clear with the question there. We select the police dogs based on what's available, primarily for their drives to do police work. The key and foremost that being their ability and their willingness to search for items. So that searching component, the first test that we do when we take all the police dogs out is some environmental testing, and then we start throwing a ball and see how long they'll search for anything. So primarily the search component is the first and foremost when we're selecting our police dogs.
Thanks very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell. Commissioner Nyson-Jordan, and then Commissioner Tsang.
Thanks. I just have a question about the policy and procedures related to the use of canines. And I know that there's decreasing use of canine teams, particularly in the US. I don't know about Europe, but I'm just having done some preliminary research that there's really a decreasing use of it around North America. And I'm just wondering whether or not we've really scrutinized our policy and procedures to bring them in line with what's happening in some of the other parts of North America where they've identified issues with the canine units.
So back in 2018, I had the privilege of being the staff sergeant support section. That's something we were always attentive to, looking globally of the utilization of police dogs. So even with trials amount our deployments with dogs, so it's something that we review on a yearly basis and looking at contacts, when we contact, where we contact, how we contact, why we contact, how we do the reviews. So for the policy piece, and I can't comment on other agencies, But our 60 years here in Calgary, we've been very thorough in looking at the trends on the force used with a canine. So one of the things that we talk about is it actually is a de-escalation tool. The motivation for other agencies to move away from dogs. I don't know exactly what the motivation is here in Calgary. What we do know is that the utilization of a dog is actually an optimum tool to mitigate subject-subject contact with an officer and a subject that's in a vulnerable state, whether it be through drugs or through that's in possession of weapons. So putting a trained animal in that position is actually a lower force scale where some people don't view it that way. It actually gets a high level of compliance from our offenders. A lot of our chronic offenders that repeat that when they see the dog, they comply. They have little to no fear of a police officer or a compliance with a police officer. Whenever you introduce a dog, the presence of an animal, and they're on the ground, please don't send a dog, please don't bite me. So when we look at the utilization of the dogs, when I worked with both Sergeant Vernon and Sergeant Gorley over the last 3 or 4 years on and off as the staff and then the current inspector, is we look globally at the trends. We look at the environment that we police in, so the trends in relation to what's the subject base that we're dealing with. So we can see in Calgary, and we see throughout North America, the vulnerability of people on drugs, their compliance to willfully surrender to police doesn't exist. So most of the data that we present here is the reason that canines being presented is that the subject is fleeing apprehension. So traditional means of a police officer showing up or looking for compliance is not going to get the arrest or apprehension. So you bring in the dog to track to locate that person, or we contain with an overt presence to isolate the crisis and then move in. So we look at in relation to policy, we're always reviewing policy, even to the stage when Sergeant Vernon talks about our contacts on a monthly basis. We sit down as a collective, as a unit, and look at is our trends in the best dealing with, are we seeing more violence towards the animals? Are we putting the animals in a successful position? When we look at the reform within the Canine Unit, when Sergeant Vernon came back as one of the lead trainers, is the bite portion is what type of trauma are we delivering to our subjects? Can we change that? Is the dog staying on that? What type of bite is it? We want a deep mouth bite. So we're always looking at how we can enhance the program, and the policy piece is something that we visit on a yearly basis.
Thank you. Commissioner Zhang?
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. My question is also on the same chart about the statistics in the last few years. So less than like 3% of contacts result in serious injury. And you just mentioned that every year there's a review of how far away the contact can be applied to the potential arrest or those kind of situations. So my question is, between the contacts and the serious injury where you have to report to the commission and the government, where are the boundaries for kind of between officer let's say action versus canine action? Do you have a comparable study on say is the cost not cost benefit, what's the benefit of using a police dog versus other methods of dealing with the situation?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm 100% clear. What I can say is, without the police dogs, almost all the offenders that we're trying to catch, we're not going to catch. The people out there run from the police immediately. By the time the police dogs have been called, it's because patrol officers haven't been able to arrest them. We probably half of our operations and our calls are specific operational plans, either with the tactical unit, with our high-risk offender program, with our drug unit, with our surveillance unit, and they're specifically targeted at arresting very high-risk offenders who will not comply, period. Until we have essentially a police dog attached to them who slow them down enough that we can get some more officers there, or we can locate them in a position, contain them in a spot, whether that's in a vehicle or it's in a shed, or whether that's into another place where they're contained, where they cannot finally get away. And then we can lock that down and either introduce whatever extra tactics we go from there, if that's within our tactical unit and introducing gas, or however we need to actually make those arrests. But these offenders do not comply. Plain and simple. So
Okay, thanks for explaining the background information. And then back to Commissioner Nathan Jordan's question about using it more like a deterrent control rather than corrective control. So is there any specific training on the police dogs and officers about how to be more effective on being deterrent rather than direct contact?
Yeah, 100%. And each contact is evaluated on its own basis. But that standard of is it necessary is the first and foremost one that we're always looking at. So as I said, when I'm talking about the canine arrests being 8-1 roughly, that is a specific canine arrest, aka we've located somebody, or there's that person from the stolen car is taken off and running, and we've chased behind them, or we've gotten in front of them, issued a challenge, told them that they're under arrest, and see the police dog, and then they comply. So you say 7 or 8 out of 80% of the time we gain compliance, and the handlers are trained to gain compliance before they absolutely have no further choice. It only comes down to about 20% of the time where at that point we're still deploying the police dog where they won't listen. So there certainly is that's kind of the incremental step in long, and in conjunction with that training, we'd rather keep more distance from us. The handlers, it's an officer safety piece. The farther we can stay away from dangerous, violent people, the happier we are. We use the police dogs to bridge that gap. Eventually, somebody has to lay hands on these people. We'd rather it be a police dog than a human officer getting injured. So we'd rather that police dog make the first contact, and then we'll follow up. But even just straight tactics, makes far more sense for our members to stay back, have the dogs at their side, and have all available options they have to them when facing these offenders.
Okay, thanks for the answers.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell, another question.
Thanks very much, Chair. So Inspector Scott and Sergeant Vernon, you spoke a little bit about the Canine Unit dogs being used as a de-escalation tool. And I mentioned the weaponized effect that dogs, particularly those 2 types of dogs, have on people. And I also spoke a little bit about the history of canine use. So could you speak to me a little bit about the work that the Canine Unit has done to apply an anti-racist lens to their unit operation, their thinking, their deployment of canine units, and the use of dogs in operational matters?
Thanks, Commissioner. I can take that question. So as mentioned earlier, I think it'll be important, and maybe I'll get Sergeant Vernon or Inspector Scott to go through, is just talk about where canines are deployed. The situations we're talking about, these are the extremes. These are the most violent offenders, some of the most dangerous people in Calgary. This isn't a day-to-day option we use. There's many functionalities for Canine Unit, so they'll be called for lots of calls for service. So the situations we're describing are the most extreme. So I just want to make sure people are mindful of that. It's not an everyday or every call type of deployment. And secondly, the training that we provide, the Canine Unit, is similar to what we provide with all the other officers in Calgary Police Service. It's not the dogs that we're training as far as anti-racism and ED&I and all those other things that we've been committed to in the organization for the past few years and prior to that as well. But it's the person on the other end of the leash, and that's the handler. And like mentioned earlier, these are 5-year constables minimum that go into the unit that would receive all the training that all other officers receive prior to entering the unit, and they would continue to receive that same training as all the other members, in addition to the canine training as well. And again, it's a use of force option, and the dog is the dog, but the person on the other end of the leash is responsible for what that dog does. So that's where we invest a lot of our time and energy.
So if I understand it, if I understand your comment, Superintendent Brar, no unique work has been done within the Canine Unit to apply an anti-racist lens.
Other than what I mentioned, no, there has not been.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
I have a couple people, Commissioner Northpay again, and then Commissioner Lynch-Proctor and Commissioner Rosell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. As a Canadian Forces veteran, one of the ideas that came to my mind were the canines that we worked with in the field, and I believe now they even have their own designated poppy for the veterans of those. Also, too, I ride a horse. I probably will ride a horse better than any boy in my community. So I really enjoyed that. One of the other aspects, like I tend to see a canine unit from the inside and from a mental health perspective. With the growing mental health crisis here, I know Vancouver went and implemented an occupational stress intervention canine to integrate into their mental health strategy. I was just wondering if there are any forecasts on the canine unit playing a part in this mental health strategy going forward with the community, and what is that going to possibly look like in the future? Because I see a huge opportunity here.
I give you a little bit of a yes and no answer there. I think the first and foremost, we do have 3 victim services dogs associated to our victim service unit, currently in the service, I think serving that exact need. So as far as, and those handlers or constables work out of the victim services unit. The canine officers under my supervision are primarily more for the other side. I think superintendent has 1 or 2 more comments. Oh, sorry, I guess he doesn't. Does that just kind of answer the question? Make sense?
Yep, thank you, and perhaps something to look into. Commissioner Lynch-Proctor, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief because I think my question has been asked now, but it was a bit of a follow-on to Superintendent Brar's just comments about the EDI training. And as the owner of 2 large Labradors, who I love, but I appreciate while on lengthy walks, not all citizens are as in love with my dogs as I am, and that there is a history to racialized groups. And so my question really was, obviously it relates to the handlers, and whether or not the training touches on the history and education of the different meaning that these dogs have to us all. So that was my first question. My second question, having had the opportunity to visit the Canine Unit in person, and they are amazing animals, and you do wonderful things with them, and I applaud you for that. Just wondering what the average tenure of these dogs is, and what the injury rate is to the dogs. Thanks. That's it.
I'll go with the sort of response to the first question. So again, I mentioned earlier, the Calgary Police Service Canine Unit's been around for 60 years. We've grown with the times. We try to stay ahead of the curve and be a leader. Like everything, there's some things for consideration here that we're hearing, and one of those ones is about, what are we training our members specifically in relation to canines and from that EDI lens, and that is definitely a takeaway for our unit and something we'll consider moving forward. So I'll pass it to Sergeant for the other.
Sure. So after we start the dogs training at roughly 1.5 years, and then if we add that 6 month of initial, so they're roughly 2 years old for the most part by the time they get out and working. If we get 5 to 6 years out of the patrol dogs, we're quite happy with that. So 7 or 8 years, they tend to start slowing down a little bit, and then that's finding that balance between experience and then getting a little bit older. Our detection profiles, we tend to be able to work those dogs a little bit longer, up to 6, 7, or 8 years old, and primarily that's being the detection profiles. For the most part, we can take breaks and schedule breaks when we need to. So the dogs can search for, let's say, half an hour, and if they need a break, we can certainly take a break. On the patrol side of things, it's a little harder to call a timeout during an operation. So we consider that. And then as far as injuries go, it's pretty rare. The most common injury for sure for us is just the dogs being high energy and going 1,000,000 miles an hour, and typical bumps, scrapes, and that type of thing. But thanks.
Thank you. And Commissioner Rosell?
Actually, Commissioner Lynch-Proctor asked my question. Thanks.
All right. And another last question from Commissioner Siddiqui.
Thank you. If I understand correctly, I think dog handlers have been predominantly male police officers that go into this area. Do you have any female police dog handlers?
Yeah, we have 2 currently in our unit.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
All right, and I'm going to turn it over to the chief for a comment or two.
Yeah, just a quick comment, just to kind of wrap up there. I think it's an important discussion, and I think the historical roots that Commissioner Campbell's talking about and that you raised, Commissioner Lynch Proctor, are really important. I think the discussion of the dog units and the canines in the context of police reform has actually been louder in the U.S. than it probably has been in Canada. And so, not that I think that the problems that the U.S. faces don't apply to Canada, but there's a little bit of a difference. And so, in my own research, there's 18,000 plus police agencies in the U.S., and a lot of those are quite small. And so you get a lot of small agencies that I think struggle in many cases to sort of keep up with the training and the recertification. And you hear stories that some police organizations have those particular positions, even though there may not be many calls, but they do it as sort of a job enlargement or enrichment for officers to provide opportunities. And I think in some cases it's been ripe for situations where, like I say, they weren't very well trained, or there were situations where there were very, very high profile things that went wrong. The one thing I will say about, and you heard it, but just to put a fine point on it here in relation to what we're doing in Canada, and in particular in Calgary. So the program here has been 60 years old, and the Calgary Police Service, as the 3rd largest municipal agency in the country, with the 2nd oldest program, has actually been looked to for development and changes and evolution in the program. And so we've offered that along the way. I think that one of the things, and again, it was said, between the helicopter program, which has been around since the death of Richard Sonnenberger shortly after, now, as far as I'm aware, our canine officers are the only canine officers in the country that are wearing body-worn video. Our officers were very early with body-worn videos. And so when you think of the layers of supervision and the layers of accountability, each canine contact, as Sergeant Vernon mentioned, results in a bite report or a grip report now, where it's reviewed and reviewed. The other thing, I think our numbers seem to be very low, like 22 for, I mean, that's great. We seem to have been fairly consistent around 60 canine contacts in a year. We're 22 thus far this year, which is good, but we don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that trend. But I also think an important stat that was added by Sergeant Vernon was only 2 to 3% of the canine contacts result in a 46.1 notification. So what triggers that is a serious injury or admission to hospital. So the vast majority of these don't actually result in any damage to the offenders that are caught. I think that's a couple things. I think the work that's been done around the grip and trying to pick the right dogs so that they're not causing additional damage. All of the oversight and the accountability in the program probably helps. And then the final thing, I think, being a winter city, probably for half the year, people are wearing winter coats, and you know, it's not like we're doing this in Florida where people are wearing a t-shirt. I think the numbers would naturally be higher in terms of the injuries that were happening. But I think all in all, I think the oversight and the vision that's been cast for the area in a large city, the value add by these dogs, and that's not to mention anything, part of our community-based policing model is the community involvement, where these officers are out there every week at YouthLink interacting with diverse youth in the city and that sort of thing. So I think that the program, I think it was mentioned, has raised nearly $1 million as well. So super well connected with the community. I think also we're backed up a little bit by our diversity advisory boards, where there's opportunity to have discussion around policy. Our policies are pretty strong. I think we've seen examples of bigger policies, but at the end of the day, I think the things that are really important, we don't deploy our dogs for minor offenses like trespassing. We don't deploy our dogs when somebody's given up. That's a criminal offense, as a matter of fact. And like I say, we're on the leading edge of developing and evolving policy in the country. So I think our program's a pretty strong one, but I did take a couple things away here in relation to the ability to provide a bit more data, maybe to provide that separately from the semi-annual reports on use of force or whatever. So lots of opportunities, I think, to discuss that. But I think a very, very accountable program, lots of oversight over it. And I certainly don't think that it's being overused. Our folks are really professional in the city. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you for all the discussion and the presentations. It is having seen them, and also the horses last week out at Spruce Meadows, which is quite interesting to see. They demonstrated how they do work with crowd control, which was very interesting. So thank you for all of that, and thank you for the acknowledgement of the training and the efforts around policy and recognition. I appreciate your taking on providing us with a little bit more data when things like this come to the fore. It's a good opportunity to just say, have we got the right information, and what do we need to do to make sure that people are comfortable with the safety that's being supported in the city. So both of the civilians, the people in the city, and of the officers as well. So it's both sides to that. So thank you very much for the very fulsome discussion. It was very helpful. Much appreciated. So the next part, we'll move on to section 6 of our agenda, where we look at public reports written by our commission staff. This month, we have the Executive Director's Report and a report that was heard from the Calgary Policing Summit that we held in September. In the interest of time, we're not going to do any verbal presentations on these reports. They were included in the materials. Do any of the commissioners have any questions about either of those reports? Policing Summit? Nope. I don't see any hands or any questions coming up. All right, with that, and again, you can look at those materials in the materials provided. Representative updates. So in section 7, we hear reports from the commissioners who represent our commission on various associations and committees. These include the Association of Alberta Police Governance and the Canadian Association for Police Governance. These are also provided this month as written reports. Do any commissioners have questions about either of those updates? Not seeing any questions. We'll move on to section 8. So the last presentation we have on our agenda today is from Illumina Research Partners, which is the firm we hire each year to conduct our survey of Calgary Police Service employees. Last year, the employee survey showed that morale, employee engagement, and trust in leadership were at the lowest point since we started doing this survey in 2008. When employees are not having a good experience at work, we know that it impacts everything from wellness to retention to the quality of service that Calgarians receive. The service and our commission have been very focused on addressing the concerns of the Calgary Police Service members for over the past year. The service leadership launched the Pathways to Engagement strategy, which is taking action on 500 different suggestions and recommendations provided by members for how their workplace could be improved. Our commission and city council also approved a $64 million budget increase and 290 new full-time positions for the 2022 to 2026 budget and plan. These will help alleviate unmanageable workloads, both in frontline policing and in the areas of service responsible for transforming how people in crisis are helped. We have also worked as a commission to directly engage with members so they can tell us about their work and what we can do to support them. Going into the employee survey this year, we did not expect that the problems that have taken years to build up would suddenly disappear. But we did hope to see some indication that the service and our commission are on the right track to restore trust, morale, and employee engagement. I want to thank all the members of the Calgary Police Service that took the time to complete the survey and share their views. We are listening. We take these results seriously, and we're committed to doing what we can to make your workplace better. With that, I'll turn it over to Yvonne Browers and Angela Starosuk at Illumina to walk through the results. We just need a minute to get the presentation and the other presenters queued up. Thanks. Right. So we just waiting for the presentation. There we go. All right. I think we're ready to go ahead. If I can turn it over to Yvonne and Angela. Please go ahead.
Okay, good. We are here. That is good. Good evening, everyone. Illumina has 40 minutes on the agenda today to share highlights of the 2023 Employee Engagement Survey and to answer any questions that you may have. I'm Yvonne Browers. I'm President and CEO of Illumina Research Partners. And with me is Angela Storzik, Vice President, who will be presenting highlights from the employee research. To begin, Angela is going to provide a quick overview of the methodology. Over to you, Angela.
Thank you, Yvonne. So good evening, everyone. I'm just going to give a quick overview of the methodology, and then we're going to jump into the results. So we conducted an online survey that was made available to all members of the CPS. The survey was a median length of 16 minutes, and 1,625 CPS members completed the survey this year. This was a 51% response rate, which is very consistent with last year's response rate of 50%. The questionnaire flow chart is shown on the right-hand side, and this year the questionnaire was updated to reflect the current CPS and commission priorities, including asking questions to explore trust in the Calgary Police Commission, to understand the impact of actions by CPS, taken to improve workloads, trust in ELT, and feelings about the PSS and promotions processes. As well, we also added a question to gain a better understanding of what has had the most positive and negative impacts on CPS job satisfaction over the past year. The first topic is about employee perceptions of safety and service delivery to citizens. Sorry, guys. I think I missed the slide. So before I go back, there it is. I was like, I thought that was wrong. Before we jump into the results, I just want to touch on the context. And this is important because there's a lot of different factors that can impact employee engagement, both inside of CPS and outside of CPS. So when we looked at what employees talked about in their open-ended comments in the survey, what we heard is they talked about some of this context. So there were concerns about transit safety expressed by employees. They noted an increase in new hires over the past year. There's an increasing trend for CPS to be called out for social issues, and they talked about this. They also talked about the call diversion pilots, such as for mental health and addictions. So now we can move on and dive into the results. And as most of you already know, there's actually good news to share this year, and there has been an improvement in many of the results that we're going to talk about today. The first topic is about employee perceptions of safety and service delivery to citizens. Perceptions that Calgary is a safe city to live in are on par with last year's results at 77%. But they do continue to be at a relative low point compared to most prior years. The good news is that employee satisfaction with service delivery to citizens did improve this year, and about 3/4 of employees are satisfied with service delivery. Some of the positive feedback that we heard from employees was about how CPS is a good service, and officers are working really hard to do the best they can with available resources. We also heard that many feel CPS has a good relationship with the community. And we also heard from a few that they heard appreciation about the hard work that CPS is doing directly from citizens. So that was also a big positive for some employees. So let's look at employee engagement. We use the Employee Engagement Index as an overall measure of CPS employee engagement, and it's comprised of 4 questions, which you can see on the screen. Proud to say I work for CPS, motivated to go above and beyond my basic job description, satisfaction with my current job, and likelihood to recommend policing or working at CPS as a career. These 4 statements reflect each employee's overall feeling and impression of the current experience and engagement at the service. So let's look at the actual employee engagement results for this year. The good news is that employee engagement improved overall and among both sworn and civilian employees. Over half of employees indicate that they have moderate to high engagement, and about 1 in 5 indicate that they have high engagement. And this is on par with the high engagement levels that we saw back in 2019 and 2020. We're also seeing a significant decline in those who have low engagement. So that's really good news, and it's good to see that this year. And this is true among both sworn and civilian members. So what we want to look at next is what employees had to say in their own words about working at CPS by different levels of engagement. So this slide shows the top mentioned themes for employees with high, moderate, and low EEI or low engagement. And what is really interesting to see this year is that we see employees from all engagement levels mention that it is a good service with not a lot of issues. And that is circled in green across the 3 rows there, or columns there, sorry. This is something that is really good news because we don't often see those employees with low engagement levels giving you positive feedback. So it's actually a really positive thing to note and to take and to consider. There has been an improvement this year. However, we can also see that inadequate staffing continues to be a top concern across all engagement levels. Connected to inadequate staffing, we can also see that those with low engagement and moderate engagement also talk about heavy workloads. So these continue to be top concerns among employees, which is negatively impacting engagement and morale. So what we're going to look at next is take a quick look at performance and what does that look like this year. This is a snapshot of performance for the year across all statements that we measured, ranked from highest performance on the left to lowest performance on the right. The statements in the green font indicate where we are seeing improvements in performance compared to last year. The statements in the black font means that the statement is new or that results are on par with last year. What we're seeing is that employee perceptions of performance have improved across the vast majority of statements that we measured. And this is a really positive step for CPS in improving morale and employee engagement after last year, where we had seen the lowest level of engagement to date. The other thing to note about performance is that we have no declines in performance since last year. So that's another great thing that you want to take note of here. I want to touch base or talk about briefly morale. So this year we added a new statement about personal morale to explore if it was different from perceptions of overall morale at CPS. What we can see on this screen right now is that half of employees, 50%, agree that their personal morale is good. However, if we look at the stacked bar on the right, we can see that less than 1/4 of employees agree that overall morale at CPS is good. So many employees do perceive that overall morale at CPS is lower than their own personal morale. Next, I want to talk about opportunities for improving employee engagement at CPS. This slide summarizes the results for a detailed, from the detailed priority grid, which can be found on page 111 in the appendix. This chart summarizes a statistical analysis that we do to understand the influence of different performance statements measured on employee engagement. The results that we are seeing this year are very consistent with what we saw last year. So I'm going to walk through this chart. We're going to start in the gray bottom left quadrant here on the screen. And this area identified here, the areas are identified in the gray quadrant. They can impact employee engagement and they have lower performance. This can actually be a bit of a tricky quadrant to interpret. So these areas can fall into this quadrant because not all employees are being impacted or they have not had a recent experience. So for example, the promotion process. Not everyone has been through the promotion process in the past year. That can impact how that statement falls on this chart. We also know from employee comments that some employees feel that their areas are adequately staffed, but others do not. So as a result, and we know inadequate staffing and heavy workloads do negatively impact employee engagement. So this area has to be carefully, this gray zone has to be carefully interpreted because it just means that not everyone is necessarily having the same experience. So it can have a different result and it ends up down in this quadrant. The top right quadrant in white has higher performance, but a lower influence on employee engagement. These are often considered to be table stakes or even employee expectations. So for this year, these include commitment to CPS values and principles, my supervisor, which includes satisfaction with the supervisor, my team, which is the relationship with coworkers, community, which is like feeling CPS services are valued by the community and feeling the workforce is representative of the community, and then health and wellness services and support. It is actually really critical for CPS to maintain performance on these areas. If performance declines, these tend to quickly become areas of needed focus. And then they drop down into the bottom right quadrant. The top, I'm going to move over to the top right quadrant here in light green. These are strengths to leverage. And these are areas with high performance and a higher influence on employee engagement. And they include, I feel I belong at CPS, and satisfaction with the workplace environment, which is all about, those two items are all about the emotional connection to CPS. So these are strengths for CPS, and CPS is performing well on those. But now I want to talk about two areas that fall into the yellow zone. That's really in the middle here, but specifically the yellow zone that's on the right-hand side is where these two attributes or statements fall. My morale is good and I feel valued as an employee. These are actually two of the top drivers of employee engagement. So they're really important to employee engagement. And there's opportunity to improve performance on these so that they're actually strengths for CPS. And these are connected again to that emotional connection. So the emotional connection is a really important driver of employee engagement at CPS. I'm going to move down to the bottom quadrant in the pink, and that's called the areas of needed focus. And the actions that you take in these areas on these items that are listed here, leadership and morale at CPS, CPS practices applied equitably and fairly, and professional development opportunities, if the actions you take, they can actually generate the greatest improvements in employee engagement. And they are top opportunities for CPS to improve employee engagement. The rest of the presentation today will be focused on new topics explored this year. So the first topic is about the CPS Pathways to Engagement Action Plan that was rolled out in September 2022 to improve employee engagement. Significant work has been done by CPS in the 6 areas, which are listed on page 7 in the report. But this survey that we did focused on getting feedback from the top 3 areas. which were improving resourcing, workloads, and resiliency, building ELT trust and support, and implementing fair, efficient, and effective processes. For each of these areas, we've provided employees with a description of the actions taken by CPS, which are shown on the bottom half of the screen here. Then we asked employees if these actions had a positive impact, no impact, or negative impact on them. And when we looked at the results, we can see that for each of the three areas here, about 1/4 of employees, 28 in the dark blue bar, 27 here, and then 26 on the end, they said that these actions had a positive impact on them, but decided to look at it in a more holistic view and say, okay, but what is the overall impact of all three actions? So what we found is that 45% of employees reported a positive impact from at least one of these three areas that were worked on by CPS. So that is actually really impressive that you got almost half of employees who experienced a positive impact. And I think this really helps to understand what is driving some of those improvements in employee engagement this year. We also asked employees about the positive and negative impacts on their job satisfaction over the past year. And starting with the positive, an employee's team is the top mentioned factor that is having a positive impact on job satisfaction, being mentioned by almost 4 in 10 employees. This includes having a good supervisor, good coworkers, and just an overall positive team environment. The next most mentioned positive impact on job satisfaction is improved resourcing and workloads, which is mentioned by about 15% of employees. So again, this is one of those things that ties back to that Pathways to Engagement plan. And in the open-ended comments, employees mentioned things like increased police budget, new members that have been hired, and some even mentioned flexible work options. Other positive mentions included good compensation and benefits, being able to help the community, and improve morale. When we look at the negative impacts on job satisfaction, we see that concerns about resourcing, workloads, and resiliency are top of mind for about 30% of employees. So this is still a challenge. Employees expressed concerns this year about inadequate staffing, particularly on the front line. And there's also concerns about heavy workloads, high turnover, and HR issues that are mentioned by employees. Perceptions of poor leadership, poor senior leadership, are also negatively impacting job satisfaction for about 1 in 5 employees. These employees feel there's a poor relationship between employees and senior leadership, and that senior leadership doesn't really care about them. Employees shared that they feel like they're just a number. And these employees are made to feel like they're easily replaceable. So as a result, they're not feeling recognized and valued for the work that they do. Concerns about the promotion process were also raised as negatively impacting job satisfaction. For example, employees shared how they feel it is difficult to show abilities and feel that there is still a bit of a lack of focus on real qualifications required for the job. They feel that too many unqualified people continue to be promoted. Employees also share concerns about the PSS process. That was mostly related to a lack of transparency in the process from their perspective, and that the process is just far too long. A lack of professional development and low personal morale are also impacting job satisfaction for a smaller number of employees. The last topic for today's presentation is about trust in the Calgary Police Commission's governance and oversight of CPS. We are seeing an improvement in trust in the Commission's governance and oversight of the service among all employees. Trust in the Commission remains stronger, though, among civilian employees. As you can see on that slide, almost half indicate they have moderate to high trust in the Commission, where For sworn, it's only 1 in 10. So there is a bit of a big gap between the two. But what I also want to mention is that this year we added some additional context to this question that explains the role of the Calgary Police Commission. And you can see that additional context here on the right-hand side of the slide. This additional context had the potential to actually impact these results that are presented on screen right now. So what we did is we dived into the employee verbatim comments and we read through them to get a deeper understanding of employee trust in the commission. And while many employees expressed how they don't trust the commission, there are some employees that did share that the commission has made improvements and has been moving in a positive direction over the past year. And we also heard about how the increased police budgets also positively impacted their trust. So this suggests that these results are true and that there has been improvements in trust in the commission's governance and oversight of CPF. We asked employees 2 questions about how to improve their trust in the Calgary Police Commission. First, we asked an open-ended question for employees to share their perspectives in their own words on what would increase their trust in the Commission's governance and oversight of the service. Then we asked the second question about the impact of specific Commission actions that were taken to help improve trust in the Commission. So what we found is there's actually some alignment in the employees' open-ended feedback about how to increase their trust and some of the Commission actions taken to try to improve trust. So that's good news. Half of employees indicated that the Commission members indicate that having Commission members visit areas in the service to learn what those areas does improve their trust. And this was also one of the top mentions by employees in their own words about how to improve trust in the Commission. They talked about how they want Commission members to improve their knowledge and understanding of law enforcement, and in particular, frontline police work. Suggestions included from employees, ride-alongs, and direct interactions with both sworn and civilian members. We also see that ensuring public or negative public comments about CPS are fair and balanced, and publicly sharing CPS successes and appreciation are important actions to improve trust. And that's around about half of employees said that. This connects to employee feedback in their own words about ensuring Commission members are not biased about police. Employees want to feel that the Commission genuinely supports CPS, especially frontline officers. And they want Commission members to be neutral, fairly evaluate all sides, and be open-minded. Finally, and this connects in with what I just talked about, improving communication around Commission decisions and activities ranks highly for improving trust. Employees want increased engagement, communication, and transparency on matters important to them so that they have the opportunity to share their perspectives, but it also helps them better understand the decisions made. And this connects back to what we just talked about ensuring that the Commission comes across as supporting CPF and fairly evaluating all sides and being open-minded. If you communicate that process to them and be transparent, they then have a better understanding of the decisions that have been made, that are being made. Chair Cornett, this concludes our presentation for today. We can now answer any questions people may have.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the time and effort that you took to put this survey together. As we do this every year, it's a lot of work, and certainly we get insights and feedback from it, but also from yourselves with your expertise. So thank you for that. So I'll turn it over to the Commission for questions. Commissioner Ogle, please.
Thank you. And thanks for all of this work. There's a lot here. I wonder, do you survey other cities, and can you make some comparables to how other cities in Canada would stack up against this survey? And I have another question as well.
So we currently, okay, do you want to go on?
No, go ahead, Angela.
At this point in time, we don't currently survey other cities in Canada right now on policing. So this is we just focus on the city of Calgary. I haven't looked at recent results for RCMP or some of the other areas that have put out employee engagement results, so I can't speak to whether they are seeing improved results this year.
Yeah. I think my understanding is that Calgary is one of the few commissions and services that annually conducts the employee engagement survey. The expertise that we do have is that we've been analyzing, I believe it's the 16th year, and we've analyzed these results for 15 years and have spent thousands and thousands of hours over those 15 years analyzing these results.
And I will just add to that, one of the things that I've looked at just over a while, and perhaps Commissioner Stiku would add, when we get together with the other associations around police governance, we often get questions about how we do this, because there are many other services across the country that don't do this at all.
No, and I appreciate that, Chair. That was part of the reason for asking the question, so that I understand that. My second question is a little more direct. And I don't know if you can ask this question, but is there a correlation between tenure and satisfaction or dissatisfaction?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there is.
And can you explain that?
Yeah. We know there's a direct connection between tenure and employee engagement. So employees who are new have higher engagements, and as your tenure goes into sort of those middle years, engagement tends to drop down. And then as tenure gets higher up again, you'll see that engagement start to rise again. So it's like maybe a J-shaped type graph that you see for engagement. So yes, there is a connection between the two.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell.
Thanks very much, Ms. Browers and Ms. Stozarek. I think I just butchered your name, with my apologies. I just wanted to go to page 18 of your presentation, which speaks to the perception of the Calgary Police Commission, and particularly the right-hand side of the page, which speaks to some of the things that the service suggests would be appropriate for the commission to do. The Calgary Police Commission is a statutory body created under the Alberta Police Act, and we have legislated responsibilities and oversight responsibilities, both ensuring there is efficient and effective policing, to provide instructions to the chief constable in regards to those policies, and to ensure that sufficient persons are employed by the service to carry out the functions of the service. There is nowhere in that description that I've just provided that speaks to being supporters of the police, or having perceptions or views of the police. How did those responses become? How were they verbalized, and how were they gathered? Because I thought that you had indicated the question had provided a description of the role of the commission as the civilian oversight. So I'm trying to understand how at least 4 of those 5 things on that page, those aren't our rule.
That's correct. So is my mic on? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. So yes, you're correct. So for the original question on rating trust in the commission, there was that description of the role of commission provided for the rating. Then we followed up with an open-ended question asking for their feedback on how we could improve their trust in the commission. And that's where this feedback on the right-hand side of the slide came from. So this is themed their comments. So there was a lot of comments by the CPS employees about concerns about commission members being biased against the police or having personal agendas or social ties. They really wanted, the feedback is about, yeah, they want commission members to support the membership, but not at all costs, okay? So they're not saying, oh, well, if we do something wrong, you need to support me. That's not what we heard. What we heard is that, you know, they want you to consider all sides and they want you to be transparent about that and to share those decisions. So that's what we heard. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosick. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. And I've got Commissioner Adidaran online, and then two more questions in the room here. Oh, go ahead, please.
Okay. Oh, hi. Thank you for the presentation. So I have a question concerning the method. Do you still have further breakdown of the results? Like, for example, can you aggregate the results by precinct, by station, or by supervisors?
I didn't hear all of that or catch all of that, but did you, just to confirm that I understood that, did you ask if we look at results by different like divisions and stuff like that?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And also as per supervisors as well.
Yes, we do. So we do look at results by civilian versus sworn, and a lot of that does get put into this report. We also have looked at results by division. So this year, the request from, we always do a little bit of a deep dive analysis for the Calgary Police Service, and they have requested that we look at the results by division. So that is being worked on, and that is something that will be delivered in November.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Commissioner Lynch Proctor.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. The first is, you mentioned that the results on staffing and workload were experienced differently across the service. Can you comment on which areas of the service felt most understaffed and overworked?
Yes, this is part of the divisional analysis that has yet to be completed. So you're going to have to take this with a grain of salt a little bit. But what I can say is that I know that the community policing, both south and north, and operational support are the areas that are feeling the most impact of, or express the most impact of, inadequate staffing and resourcing issues.
And so was there any, it's very concerning, is there any further commentary on lack of adequate training and tools to do their job? And is there any more specificity that you can provide around that?
Yeah, they weren't very specific around that, you know, because I was looking at that too to understand. I think a lot of the comments was more about being outdated tools and not modern enough tools. There was a lot of comments around those areas and that they weren't necessarily meeting the needs of the service right now, from their perspective, of course.
Okay. Can I ask another one? We've seen this before, but one of the results is that only 40% agree that the CPS takes appropriate action in incidents of harassment. Was there any commentary around that result?
Yeah, that result hasn't really changed from last year, if I recall correctly. And I don't actually recall reading, I've read a lot of open ends, and a vast majority of the open ends, and I don't recall really seeing anything about harassment in the open-ended comments.
Okay. And just one, I'm just going to use this for one comment too. Obviously, it's very helpful to have the information about how CPC can try to engage differently in the future to increase trust. It's obviously a big area for concern, and I think we have to give consideration to the reach that we have from these meetings in terms of membership and civilians. We spend a lot of time here, and so I think we need to make sure that we're using everybody's time effectively and that we're doing the right things and spending enough time in the community to actually reach the membership, because I think what we hear from this is we're not. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Nyson-Jordan.
Thanks. This is more of a comment. From my perspective, reading through this the first time, and it depends whether you're a half full or a half empty type person. So from my perspective, I was happy to see the inflection change. I am still majorly concerned at the level of all areas of engagement and the comments. So I think we have started on the way back. I think we've got a ton of things that we still have to do. And I would only provide the comment related to we as a commission being there as a governance body, working in an organization of many organizations. The best governance is where you've got employees that are also very happy and content and providing the best, having the best morale. So however we need to do that, I think we still have a long way to go, but I'm happy to see this has changed the inflection point. Thanks.
Commissioner Zong.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. My question is about that page 13. Many employees perceive overall morale at CPS to be lower than their own morale. Is that the first time we asked this question compared to results? Or is...
Yes, this is the first time that we have asked about personal morale. We have asked about overall morale at CPS for many years. So, and there is a big gap between the two. So personal morale, is way better than overall or perceived overall morale at CPS. So there may be some communications that could be done to help change perceptions of overall morale at CPS.
And for that, 27% of employees who feels their personal morale is like high or moderate agreement is good, but generally is not good. Like, I'm curious about the actual question asked about the personal morale. Like, do we have a definition of personal morale in the question, or is asked in a different way?
It's exactly the definition. How we ask is we ask people to rate on a scale of 1 to 10, from 1 being strongly disagree to 10 being strongly agree. To rate the question that you see on screen, my morale is good. So we're calling that personal morale. Morale at CPS is good, calling that just more overall morale.
Okay, based on your experience with other organizations, like that big gap, other than communication, is there anything else missing?
So one of the things that we did when we did the analysis is we looked at what is correlated or influencing those two different statements about morale. And what we found is that for my morale is good, so that personal morale, that was more about the emotional connection. That was about feeling valued and recognized and some of those types of emotional connection statements. and pride and a sense of belonging. When we looked at morale at CPS is good, so that overall morale, what we found is that was actually being driven and closely connected to leadership. So that's perceptions of leadership, that actions show you care, you're working toward the same goals. So that particular statement connected much more closely to leadership perceptions, whereas my morale is good connected to that emotional connection and how they feel about CPS and belonging and pride. I hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the detailed analysis. Thanks, back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the survey? So with that, I will say thank you very much. Lots of work still to do. It is very nice to see the inflection, but we know that there is a lot more work that we must do. And I think everyone in this room here is willing and ready to take that on, and will continue to push ahead. So thank you very much. And with that, that's the end of the presentations and reports for today. We will now invite public guests who've registered to speak to do so. Our public participation process is designed to balance the desire to hear from the public with the need to keep meetings a reasonable length. Those of you who registered to provide a presentation will have 4 minutes to speak, followed by commissioners having an opportunity to ask brief clarifying questions. Those who registered to ask a question will have 2 minutes to speak, followed by a member of the Commission or the Calgary Police Service having 2 minutes to respond. Please keep your comments to the topic you provided when you registered. We also cannot discuss a complaint about any specific employee or interaction with the police. If you'd like to discuss a complaint against an officer or other employee, please contact our Public Complaint Director or the Calgary Police Service Professional Standards section so it can be properly addressed. I'd also like to thank everyone who took time to send us written submissions prior to this meeting. They've been provided to everyone in the Commission, and we appreciate your insights. And finally, a reminder to members of the media that we'll hear from the public first, and then we'll hold a media availability for you. Please put through the first speaker.
Thank you, Chair. Our first speaker today is, our first and only speaker today is Ewan Thompson, and he has 2 questions to ask. One relates to religion in the workplace, and the second relates to the processing of Freedom of Information requests. Mr. Thompson, you should be free to speak.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me back. And I just have like a really brief series of questions for each of those, if that's okay. They're just yes or no questions. And hopefully that's not too big of an issue for you, but just let me know if it gets to be too much. So these direct questions are going to be directed to Chair Cornett. Unless somebody else feels compelled to respond, that's totally fine. Last week, so kind of the first quick series here. Last week, Adam Toy at Global News reported on the Calgary Prayer Breakfast, which featured a keynote speaker promoting residential school denialism and homophobia. The speaker received a universal standing ovation from those in attendance. Chair Cornett, are you aware that a CPS honor guard was present for this event?
We encourage the service to connect with the community in all of the various areas that the community represents. This can be unpredictable and unknown, and we understand that the values of that particular event were certainly not in alignment with what we would have expected. But that's part of the nature of interacting and engaging with the community on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Does Calgary Police Commission intend to identify and disclose which members of CPS were present and which ones joined the standing ovation?
Sorry to interject. Our process for questions is you ask all your questions at once, and then we can respond. So if you're able to do that, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Absolutely, I'll do that. So does Calgary Police Commission intend to identify and disclose which members of CPS were present at the event, which ones joined the standing ovation? And then the next piece of that would be, is the presence of an honor guard at the prayer breakfast in alignment with the human rights legislation for religious neutrality of public bodies?
Those questions are something for the service to follow up on, and we'll work with them to look into those. But at this point, Those certainly aren't the views of the service, and they're certainly not the views of the commission. At this point, we'd have to look into that further. Don't know if the chief has anything additional to add to that. No. Okay, can you go on to the second part of your questions?
Absolutely, thank you. So I'm in the middle of submitting some FOIs, some Freedom of Information requests, and I have a couple questions around the access to information at CPS. I'll just totally leave aside the fact that multiple statements have now been obtained from CPS, indicating that CPS staff are instructed to delete email records. So these are the two questions. Are you aware that if you want email records from an office at Calgary Police on any given search term, you need to provide the specific names of every individual working in that office? And whether or not you're aware of that, can you point me to where I might obtain a complete database of CPS staff and their divisions so that I might have a chance to actually access these records?
I think the one response that I have that overarches all of this is that the Office of Information and Privacy Commissioner is responsible for reviewing specific cases to determine if the process, the service has followed the legislation properly. So if you don't believe it's been followed properly, then you need to go back to the Office of Information and Privacy Commissioner. Thank you for your questions, and we appreciate your being here today. Can you put through the next caller, please?
Chair, there are no more public speakers today.
Thank you. And with that, we'll just take a moment to reorganize so that the chief can come closer to the camera for the media, and people are welcome to stand, stretch. If you're going to leave, if you can be fairly quiet as we get on to the media part so everybody can still hear. Thanks.
For members of the media, we're just rejigging the room and we will get your questions momentarily. Okay, thank you for your patience. We will now move on to media questions. For members of the media who are in the queue, please just raise your hand if you do have a question and ensure that your media outlet is in your name as well if possible, just because I might not know you. I will also say that we have Illumina research partners with us still who are willing to take questions on the survey if you have more of a technical question related to that. So to start us off, we'll go to Tyson Fedor at CTV. Tyson, you should be free to ask your questions.
Thanks so much, guys. This one is for the chief. And chief, granted, I know this investigation is under ACERT at the moment, but I know that there have been a few questions raised within the community of Falcon Ridge, including from Ward 5 councillor at the time. He knows he's heard some answers from CPS in regards to the officer-involved shooting last week, and just kind of the public nature of that shooting. Are you able to kind of, I know you can't get necessarily into the details of the investigation, but just take us through kind of how an investigation like that can be so public, and with highly trained officers involved, how does that kind of unfold in that sense when it comes to trying to make a high risk arrest, but then eventually it does turn into a very violent affair with gunfire going off?
Sure. Thanks, Tyson. Just generally, I guess what I would say is, yeah, lots of work done, obviously, in the community of Falcon Ridge, lots of work done with Councillor Dollywell, lots of support he's provided there with what he's hearing. And so that's really important. I guess at a high level, what I would say is it's very clear that these were a couple individuals who had been targeted for arrest for serious offenses, violent individuals. With respect to the way that operations like this unfold, you can see from what happened here and in other cases, I would say that, a lot of thought is put into making sure the right resources are engaged in these types of operations, knowing that, they can be very unpredictable. In this case, that was very much the case here. Officers always consider public safety. That's always the number one consideration. In fact, in terms of the priorities that they look at, it's public safety, it's officer safety, and then it's the safety of the suspects third in a case like that. And so I would just say this was a very, very dire situation, obviously unpredictable. But, with respect to situations like this, I would say that it's not uncommon for officers to, encounter suspects in a public place like this, to arrest people in a public space like this, and to seize weapons out of vehicles in a public space like this. What is uncommon is the fact that in this case, the suspects were willing to shoot at officers. And so I think that just speaks to how dangerous and unpredictable this was. And very, very traumatic, obviously, as we've said, for people who witnessed it, people in the neighborhood, in the plaza, and which is why we've actually spent a lot of time and energy on working with those individuals and in that space to try to provide supports as best we can. So I think that's really as much as I can say now, but we certainly do thank the community for all the support. There's been a ton of support, and yeah, some very dangerous people taken off the street. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Tyson.
Do you have any follow-up, Tyson?
No, that's all I had. Thanks, guys.
Okay, perfect. So we will move on then to Darren Krause. Give me just a moment here. Darren, you should be free to speak.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So first, I just want to address something here in the survey. There's mention of 290 full-time positions that are being budgeted over 4 years. Now, Chief, this question is probably for you, but when we look at things like attrition, the annual attrition, the city population growth, and even the geographic growth of the city of Calgary, is that investment, do you think, enough to handle some of these concerns about workload and the adequate staffing?
Well, Darren, it's certainly a good start. As we worked with the commission to plan for the upcoming 4 years, we looked at all of those considerations, population, sort of the challenges post-pandemic that we were seeing. And so we tried to project out as far as we could on both the sworn side and the civilian side. I should say that 290 actually comprises both sworn and civilian. And so, yeah, it's a good start. The other practical side of that is, as you mentioned, is the attrition. So there's a modeling that gets done as to how much growth we can onboard in any given year and over the 4 years. So I would just say that the commission put us through our paces. A lot of good work was done. We were very thankful to receive the support from council and the community to move forward over the 4 years. And so again, we'll do that. We'll gain the insights that we will gain through the 4-year budget cycle, and then that'll inform sort of where we go in the next 4 years. I should also add that the other side of this is the demand side. So a lot of good work has been done to sort of reduce the number of calls going to the screens of our officers. So you can think of the work done with the commission and the community around investing additionally in PACT and mobile responders, and also the moving 211 into 911. So that's been helpful. We've also reviewed all of our MOUs with external partners, so fire, EMS, transit, bylaw, that type of thing, and the dispatch guidelines in Calgary 911. That has also reduced the number of calls. So at a time when everybody else's calls are going up in terms of fire and EMS, we're actually seeing a reduction in calls for service to the police. And that's not because the demand isn't there. It's because of some of this other work being done on the demand side. So even as we staff up as best we can, and we know that takes time, we're also working on that other side. So between the two, I think we're going to make some progress. But again, it takes time. And if you're somebody on the front line working hard, it's not going to seem quick enough. I'm certain of it.
Okay, well, you answered my follow-up question, so I will just ask this one, just a general emotive comment. Are you happy with the direction that you've seen in the numbers here?
Yeah, I would say that there's been a ton of work done across the organization and by the commission to be responsive to the survey that we had last year. That I've said it before, the survey was heart-wrenching last year. So I'm thankful for the work that was done. And so yes, on that basis, I'm pleased to see an inflection. I'm pleased to see modest increases. At the same time, we know from talking to our employees the 6 themes that we heard. We know that it's complicated, and so we know there's a ton more work to do. So it's good but not great. It's better than it was, but it's not best. We've got lots of room to improve, and I think everybody's committed to keeping on our foot on the pedal and going in that direction.
Okay, thank you, Darren. We will now move on to Julie from CBC. Julie, you should be able to speak.
Hi, this is for the chief. I just wanted to, it's just in touching on that, the survey. Just how do you plan on moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I would say we're going to continue doing exactly what we're doing. We will actually take time. I think the partners from Illumina had mentioned in their presentation that they will do a further follow-up, a deeper dive on the results of the survey to sort of a division level. So just for context, that'll be at a level that's still large enough or still big enough that it's anonymous. You won't be able to tell who made what comments, but it will give us insight into which areas of the service are feeling, which way. So that will be very insightful. But I can tell you, we did a ton of work last year after the survey to go back to our employees. We did focus groups with the employees. We talked about this survey. Additionally, we did an external scan. I think Commissioner Ogle asked a question about, what is it looking like in other municipalities around the country? What we found was this wasn't an issue unique to CPS, but what we did find is we had the richest data that anybody had. And so that puts us in a very good place to move forward. We also did an internal look at the last 5 years of our survey. And I've said it before, and quite frankly, we, the police service, simply didn't do enough. The leaders in the police service to be responsive to what our employees were telling us. They had been telling us what they were concerned about, and we hadn't actioned it. And so really it's not about, simple fixes. It's actually about a fundamental change in making sure we value our employees and that we're responsive to what they're telling us. So we've started that this year. We've seen that we've been able to make some progress, but again, we've got more work to do and we're committed to doing it.
Do you have a follow-up, Julie?
It was kind of based on the same sort of thing as what you just talked about at the end there. Just, there is concerns with poor leadership still, and just how do you plan to tackle that?
Well, I think we sort of have tackled that with the engagement in our folks. With the engagement at the focus group level, we actually heard 6 things or 6 themes. We went back after to actually confirm, is this in fact the 6 things that are these representative of what we're saying? So we went back to the focus groups. We also had over 500 unique suggestions or recommendations from employees. We've now actioned over 80% of those, so there's some yet to do. And with respect to the 6 themes, we've continued to progress those. The one that continues to be the number one issue, and it's reflected in the survey, is workload and staffing. And so we know this has been a challenging year. Think about all the protests, think about the demonstrations, think about the shootings and the violence, and even hosting large events like the World Petroleum Congress. We've had to cancel vacation for our members and keep them at work at a time when they're feeling fatigued. We're onboarding the growth. We were fortunate to have the support from Commission and Council. We're onboarding the growth, but in policing, it takes time. The training takes time. Going out and doing your Block 2 training with a field trainer to learn the on-the-job training takes time. And so, like I say, I think, there's no question that if you're working on the front line, it's not fast enough, no matter how fast we could do it. On the leadership side, what was very clear to me, I've been out and about and I've been accessible and speaking to members, and what they were looking for from the leadership team is support. They felt like they weren't supported around a lot of important work that they were doing. And I think, you would look, if you Google, you'll see that I'm providing as much support as I can, and the senior leaders in the organization are doing the same. So in terms of what do we plan to do, I think we're going to stop for just a second and say we've made a little bit of progress. How do we retool, get the information from Illumina? And like I say, we're going to keep our foot on the gas.
Okay, thank you, Julie. We will now move on to Tiffany Goodwin from City TV. Tiffany, you should be available, or sorry, able to speak.
Hi there. My question is for Chair Sean Cornett. Just on the survey of officers and the level of trust in the commission, I believe something that ranked high was they wished that the commission had a better understanding of policing, and they wished that commission members would see all sides of an issue and be free of anti-police bias or having like their own personal agendas. Given how low the morale is right now within the force, is that something you're going to look at? Just maybe make some changes so that members do feel more supported in your role as commission and your attitudes and stuff towards officers and the work that they do.
Thank you for that question. Yes, we will continue to work on that. Some of the things that the commissioners do is get out for ride-alongs. We've done education sessions at West Winds with a number of the special units and different things over the last couple of years. During COVID, we had 2 years where we were not able to get out and spend time. So there's some of us around the table right now who spent the first 2 years on Zoom. But since then, we've really made an effort to get out to graduations, to get out to award ceremonies, to get out to communities. So those are some of the things that we've done. We've also looked very much at our communication, and so we went and reviewed our communication policy near the end of last year to make sure that we were communicating well. The Police Summit was one of the things that came out of our strategy day when we talked about how do we connect with the community better. So all of those things are things that we have been working on. There's 15 of us and a workforce of 3,000. So getting out there is a lot of effort for us as a group of volunteers, but I know that each and every one of us is very interested in doing that. And so we will take a look along with Illumina and get input from the service and other places and make sure that there are things that we're doing that are working. If it's ticked up a little bit, that's awesome. But we have lots more to do, and we'll continue to work at that over the next year. So that's sort of work in progress, but continued effort on our part. We truly understand that we need to continue to build that trust.
Can I just follow up and ask Chief Mark Neufeld if he was surprised by the top answers by his staff, that the staff felt like there needed to be greater understanding of policing and that commission members need to be able to see all sides of an issue and be free of anti-police bias. Were you surprised that that ranked so high amongst your staff?
No, no, I wasn't, because of course, being inside the organization, I get a sense of it from day to day, talking to people. But I think, as Chair Cornett said, we spent the first 2 years on virtual meetings and that type of thing. And I really noticed when we were able to get in the room together, actually, when we were finally able to do that sort of post-pandemic, you could even tell, and in all of our personal lives, we probably experienced the same thing. You could tell that the tone and tenor of the communication and the understanding was much better. We were able to communicate better. And yeah, so I commend the commission for the work that they've done. I can tell you one thing. When we talk about morale and engagement, when it comes to the CPS employees, I would suggest to you we don't have an engagement problem because our folks are smart and they're engaged. We see it in the number of comments, we see it in the response rate to the survey and the comments that are provided. Our folks are willing to provide the feedback. We just have to do something about it. We have more of a morale issue right now, and we're working on that, but the commission has been committed and they've delivered. And again, as it has been said, more work to do. We've been committed, we've delivered, and as has been said, more work to do.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. So we will now go on to our last speaker with our hands, or sorry, last media member. That is Adam Toy. While Adam's asking his questions, if any of you on the call have another follow-up, please do feel free to raise your hand and we'll come back to you. But Adam, we'll go to you now. You should be able to speak.
Yeah, hi there. I just wanted to circle back on that honor guard piece that the member of the public brought up. A question for the chief: were you aware that members of the CPS honor guard were going to be in attendance at that at that prayer breakfast. And am I correct in understanding that you've been in attendance yourself in past past prayer breakfasts?
Hi, Adam. Yeah. So what I would tell you about that is the prayer breakfast has gone on in Calgary and many other cities for many years. So when I came to Calgary in 2019, there was a prayer breakfast. I attended it at that time. And then I think we went into COVID. And then there was a modified one that I recall that was held at another location during COVID. And so, yes, so I've gone in the past, and I think the same can be said for community leaders across the service or across the city, as well as elected officials at all levels. It's a very highly attended event. So to your question about was I aware that honor guard officers had attended, not specifically, but I'm not surprised because we have attended in the past. So yeah, I wasn't surprised that they had attended. I had been invited myself, Adam, and because of the shooting, I wasn't able to make it. Otherwise, I probably would have been there as well. And I view the breakfast, the prayer breakfast, similarly to all of the other hundreds of other events we go to all year long. And there are opportunities. Sometimes it's with faith communities, sometimes it's with other community groups to be able to, build relationships, build trust, and sort of post-COVID, it's been really, really important to get out and do that. So, yeah, I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, very fully. Thank you. The other question that I had was with regards to the survey. You said that you're starting to do some work in terms of improving the morale of your officers this year. I'm wondering if you can provide a bit more insight into that, or is it just a matter of having more touch points with the service members?
No, there was actually, going back to last year's survey, if I could take you back there. So about this time last year, obviously the results of the survey were very disappointing. And I use the word heart-wrenching for all of us. And so as a result of that, we were very focused at that particular time. And we went and did a number of things. One of them was actually looking at focus groups. Well, we analyzed the survey results from last year. Then we brought together focus groups from within the organization to talk about what those meant in different areas and to them. I mentioned we did an external scan to try to see whether or not this was an issue, the low morale issue was an issue unique to our service, or whether that was one that other police services were seeing around the country. What we learned was that the morale issue was challenging right around the country, but we had better data than most other police services in that regard. And then, as I mentioned, the other thing we did was we actually looked at our survey over the last 5 years, because again, we had that rich data to say, what have our folks been telling us and what have we actually accomplished? And frankly, from probably 2015 to 2019, we had 5 different chiefs over 4 years. And then we ran into COVID, and Adam, we just didn't do enough. And so we realized our people had been talking to us. We hadn't been responsive. And so we developed Pathways to Engagement, which is not a program. It's not an initiative. It's just a different way of communicating with our employees and making sure that we're actually signposting or I don't want to use the word marketing, but we're indicating to people that when we do things in the organization, that they're connected to what you've asked us to do. Because quite frankly, the issues we face are not, that we don't have enough foosball tables or that we don't have good enough equipment. We have those things. The issues are way more complex than that. And so again, I think we had to do a better job of communicating those things. And so we have worked super hard. I mentioned earlier on, there was 6 themes that came out and over 500 unique ideas and suggestions. We've actioned and responded to 80+% of those. We have a few more to do. And then we continue to work on those 6 themes. And so it's a very intentional effort that's going on, and that effort will continue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adam. So last call for any burning questions. Tiffany, you can go ahead. Sorry, Tiffany, if you're still there, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you there.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I was just wondering, I think I read somewhere that the survey, only 51% of staff actually took the survey, which, is pretty standard, but still it's not everybody. So is there anything that is stopping people from taking this employee survey, and what efforts are being made to ensure that all employees or a vast majority of employees actually submit feedback?
I can start, and the chair may have comments, but I don't want to speak for Illumina, but I think we have to here at this point. There was a lot of really good work done, Tiffany, with respect to the way that the survey was designed and the way it was administered. And so the survey went out in the summertime. It was actually left open for an additional couple weeks. So it was open for a period of, I believe, 6 to 8 weeks, just to make sure everybody could respond. There was a number of reminders sent out. There was a number of different communications that would encourage response. And that number, the 51%, I believe it was this year for a response rate, is actually for a survey of this type, that's a pretty good number. And obviously, the survey people in Illumina, the professional group, would know more. But at 51% like this of employees, the survey certainly represents the workforce, and it's certainly something we can take and work on.
Yeah,
would just-
I'll just add to that to say,
Go ahead.
yes, the survey response is very good. And the level of engagement that we see in this survey is really astounding in terms of the open-ended feedback and the time that folks take to complete and provide their thoughts. It's very comprehensive, very professional, very good.
Great.
Okay, great. So seeing no further hands, that will conclude our media availability and also our meeting. Thank you for joining us.